Go inside the Crimson Tide with your hosts Rodney Orr and Gary Harris, keeping you informed on everything Alabama. Tider Insider TV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports.
And good evening, everybody, and welcome in to another edition of Tider Insider TV, as mentioned, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports, alongside Rodney Orr from TiderInsider.com. I'm WVUA 23 Sports Director Gary Harris. Well, Rod, we're going to start with Alabama men's basketball. It's been an unusual season, a roller coaster ride. The highs have been really high. Wins over Gonzaga, Baylor, Houston, Tennessee, Arkansas. The lows have been lows. Georgia's only SEC win against Alabama. Missouri beat Alabama. Iona beat Alabama. Davidson beat Alabama. A&M just wore Alabama out last week at home. So it's been an unusual season, and you knew that the season would kind of wrap up that way. But instead of real highs, it ended with real lows. The Crimson Tide had that home game that I alluded to, Rod, against Texas A&M last Wednesday. We're on the road at LSU on Saturday. And against A&M, Alabama led at the half, okay? So you're feeling pretty good. We knew A&M would bring it defensively. I mean, they get up into you. Alabama knew what they were going to do. They were going to overplay the passing lanes. They were going to contest everything. You didn't count on them scoring 50 points in the second half. They're not an offensive team. But just to be honest with you, I thought it was Alabama's most disappointing half of the season. That second half against A&M, A&M just beat them down and just looked like they wanted it more. They were the tougher team. Alabama didn't have any answers, and they wound up losing by 16 at home, their worst loss of the season. Okay, so in their first loss to an unranked team this year in the SEC. Now, so they go to at home, I should say, their first loss to an unranked team at home. Certainly, we mentioned they lost at Vanderbilt. Lost at Missouri and lost at Georgia. But Alabama had a chance to turn it around in the season finale in Baton Rouge. And you know what? They could have won at LSU. They lost in overtime despite turning it over 21 times, despite struggling again from three. They had a shot clock violation down late, down one, where they didn't even get a shot off. And they wound up losing that game. So they finished the season with a 19-12 record. Sixth in the SEC with a 500 mark. I was hoping they would get to 20 wins in the regular season. Now, Rod, you look at this team, and I said last week or a couple weeks ago, I thought they had Final Four potential. But now I'm thinking about to make it to the Final Four, you got to win 4 games in a row. This team can't string together 4 wins during the regular season. How in the heck are they going to string together 4 wins in the NCAA tournament? But same thing in the SEC tournament. They're going to make a run there. They got to string some wins together. It starts on Thursday night. They'll play the Vanderbilt and Georgia winner. But just your thoughts on this team and where it's at right now.
Well, listen, I think you summarized it perfectly. I mean, it's been up and down. It's been a roller coaster. We could talk about all those games, but really, Gary, you almost think you need to just move forward because it's a new season now. As you start to move into tournament time, SEC tournament, the team has a little bit, they can say they have new life. Maybe they can find some rhythm with some consistency, which they've struggled to do. But obviously if they can do well in the SEC tournament, we think they're already in the NCAA tournament. So, again, I just think that we need to put this regular season behind because we can continue to say the same things. But really, Gary, when you look at the last 7 games of the season, they've turned it over 84 times.
Yeah,
84 turnovers. That's what's haunted them.
Yeah, and we're going to get to an SEC tournament preview in just a moment. But right now it's time for Coach Talk. And Alabama men's basketball has now dropped its last 2 games heading into the SEC tournament. And, yeah, it's the same old, same old. Too many turnovers. Sometimes they play good defense. Sometimes they don't. Struggling to shoot the ball with consistency from 3. Coach Oates spoke about the ongoing issues with his basketball team.
We showed multiple clips to our guys where there's 5 guys in the paint and they're still trying to drive it through, single gaps and getting stripped. Like, we got to get it out of our hands a little earlier, get it moving. Some of them I don't have an answer for. When we just threw the ball to the other team without being aggressive at all. It's just, if you're a high major Division I basketball player, you're not supposed to be doing that.
Still, Alabama is the 6th seed out of 14 teams. We said they'll play the winner of the 14 seed Georgia versus the 11 seed Vanderbilt on Thursday night. And, Rod, as we look ahead to this tournament, again, Best case, Alabama's capable of beating Gonzaga, beating Baylor, beating Houston, beating Tennessee, beating Arkansas. Worst case, they can lose to Georgia. Now, if they beat Georgia or Vanderbilt, they get Kentucky. But I say this, you can't worry about Kentucky. You got to win that first game because Vanderbilt almost beat you up in Nashville, and Georgia did beat you in Athens. So everybody's looking at that Kentucky game looming on Friday, but first things first, win the first game,
well,
right?
I don't know how you can look forward. If you've been following this team, you've seen the ups and downs, you've seen how they play down to competition. So I really don't see how you could look forward to Kentucky. You're right, Gary. You have to take it one at a time.
And we know this. Alabama is going to the NCAA tournament. That much we know. But, you know, this time last week, we were talking about possibly being a 4 or 5 seed. You go down to Tampa and you get hung with a loss there in that first game. That's 3 straight losses. You might be looking at an 8 or 9 seed. I mean, this team needs to win that first game for sure, and then needs to play Kentucky a good game. Now, I think they're capable of beating Kentucky. I'm certainly not picking it. As I said, they got to win the first game first, Rob. But I still think, despite what I've said tonight, that this team has the potential, and I say potential, because stringing together 4 wins in a row like they've got to do to win the SEC tournament or get to the Final Four in the NCAA tournament, it's been a while since they've strung 4 wins together in a row. But best case Alabama, they're capable of beating anyone.
Well, you know, people say Alabama's a real scary team because if they get hot, if they shoot the threes with consistency, they can be really, really dangerous. They turn up the tempo defensively, play well on that end, don't turn the basketball over. Gary, we've seen it. They can compete with anybody in the country. So if they can get on a hot streak, play with consistency, yeah, you're right.
And, Rod, this note, freshman Jason Holt, who was left at home in Tuscaloosa, did not make the trip to Baton Rouge, is back with the team, and he will be available for the SEC tournament. All right, the SEC honors were announced today, and we are going to talk a little bit about that. Alabama had no first-teamers on the All-SEC team. Jaden Shackelford, though, was a second-team choice for the second year in a row. J.D. Davidson and Charles Bediako were named to the All-Freshman team, and Keon Nellis was named to the SEC All-Defensive team. Again, Rod, I think that's about right. I thought Shaq had an okay year. I had a couple people text me today, why didn't Alabama have anybody on the first team? I think the coaches got it right. I don't think they have any first-team SEC players, in my opinion.
You know, Gary, as I'm looking at these honors, the guy that really intrigues me, Bediako. A big player, what is he, 7 foot?
Yeah, 7 feet tall.
You know, I mean, he's a guy with the potential, as a young player that could be really a great player down the road.
Yeah, so Alabama gets 4 players recognized, but no first-team All-SEC selections this season. Well, still to come on Tider Insider Television, this past weekend was the first big weekend with the 2023 football recruiting class in mind as far as visits. Rodney's going to have the latest on that when we come back. And Alabama softball hosted Texas and Miami of Ohio in the T-Mobile Crimson Classic this past weekend, and it was some exciting softball action, but the Tide continues to roll. How about 20-0? And we'll be taking your phone calls, getting your emails, and answering your tweets. Give us a call, as always, 205-348-WVUA. That's 348-9882. Or you can email us at the address on your screen, or you can tweet at us. Use the hashtag TITV, and Stu and Matt will be looking for your tweet. We'll be right back with a show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide, Tider Insider TV. And welcome back to Tider Insider Television, sponsored by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports. He's Rodney Orr. I'm Gary Harris, and I know that you know who you are. Well, Alabama football recruiting is heating up. Football had a major visit weekend with some of the top junior prospects over the weekend. Rodney, Alabama hosted 16 recruits on Friday and Saturday. And both of the players committed for 2023, quarterback Jalil Hurley and safety Elliott Washington, were both in Tuscaloosa. You know, Thompson High School teammates, defensive lineman Peter Woods and quarterback Tony Mitchell were there. Several top in-state prospects. You kind of pick it up on how everything went. I know you've had articles on TiderInsider.com about it.
Yeah, you know, Gary, again, I mean, it's really early, but you have these kind of major prospects in, and it's a great year in the state of Alabama. Listen, there's possibly 5 stars in this state, which is unheard of. And you mentioned Jalil Hurley, the corner from Florence, is already committed. He's one of them. Elliott Washington, of course, committed as a safety. But he's really a versatile defensive back. He's a 4-star at Venice, Florida. But, Gary, some of the top talent around the country. Carmani McLean's the #1 corner in the country out of the state of Florida, 5-star rated player. Jalen Hell is an outstanding wide receiver from the state of Texas, a 5-star player. You kind of get the drift. A lot of really talented talented players. We hadn't mentioned Ryan McElderry.
Big offensive lineman out of Anniston.
Committed to Georgia, over 330 pounds. Really good-looking player. And Peter Woods, we always talk about him on your radio show. Yeah. Probably haven't talked about him as much here.
High motor.
Look, I think Peter Woods is one of the top 20 players in the country.
I do too. He destroys people. As coaches like to say, he plays on the other side of the line of scrimmage, and as a defensive lineman, that's what you want. He creates chaos. Let me ask you about Pierre, a guy that has a lot of athletic ability. What's his interest level in Alabama?
You talking about Yanze Pierre? Yeah, out of Eufaula. He's a disruptive player. I mean, he's got a long frame, 6'4". He's close to 220 pounds. We actually had a story with him on Tighter Insider. Look, there you see him there. Very strong kid, long arms. But, yeah, he likes Alabama quite a bit, has a great relationship with the coaching staff. There's no question about that. He's another one of those guys, Gary. In a normal year, he would be a guy that you would be saying, okay, we're talking about him a lot. But in this year, there's so many great players that he's one of the group, which is a good thing.
Absolutely. Incredibly athletic. And I think one of those, Rodney, he's what you call a guy whose best football is probably in front of him. He's still kind of learning to play the game.
Tons of potential. Yeah. You look at his frame, Gary, look at playmaker, blocks, kicks. He's just a football player.
Yeah. All right, we talked about this on my radio show, but Jaleel Hurley is one of the in-state five-star defensive players, the cornerback out of Florence. And he's already committed. This is an unbelievable year in state, as you've already referenced. To have a guy like that already committed here for these visits, is he, in essence, a recruiter? Does he become a recruiter for Alabama?
Well, I think anytime you have a great five-star player, yeah, absolutely. He can certainly help you. He's a guy that's widely recognized, well-known amongst his peers as recruits. So I think, he certainly could have a lot of impact, a lot of influence. And he's a guy, Gary, it's just a tremendous prospect. The thing I really like about him, too, he's an in-state kid. He always wanted to come to Alabama. He's not going to likely be one of these guys that's going to flip-flop back and forth. So I think Jaleel Hurley's a real solid commitment.
All right, we'll keep you up to date, as always, on Tighter Insider TV and Alabama football recruiting circles, and also at TighterInsider.com. All right, let's get to softball. Crimson Tide undefeated, wrapped up the Crimson Classic over Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. 4 games, going to perfect 4-0 against Texas and Miami of Ohio. And they were pushed in this tournament now. So it was really good to get some tough competition, because the next time they play will be Friday night down in Red Stick against LSU in Baton Rouge to open SEC play. Pitcher Lexi Kilfoyle still out with a foot injury, but Alabama leaned not only on Montana Fouts, but also on Jayla Torrance and also their freshman Salter in the circle rod. And again, against tough competition, they won the tournament, went undefeated. They're 20-0 going into SEC play. But not only are they opening SEC play this weekend, but they're opening on the road in a tough place to play down at LSU.
Yeah, they'll be really challenged, Gary. This is a team that obviously has depth pitching. When you have Montana Fouts, probably the most dominant pitcher in college softball, but they've got depth. They can. There you see they got speed on the base path. They can hit the ball really well. They can hit with power. This is a team that really appears to be a little deeper maybe than some of the more recent teams. So I really like this team. And, hey, listen, it's always good to beat Texas. I don't care what you play them in. It's always good to beat Texas.
Especially if they swept the baseball series against Alabama. Yeah, complete team. Defensively, they've been outstanding. 3 errors in the first 16 games. Now, they did have a few errors over the weekend, but that's softball. It's going to catch up with you. Batting .326. They've hit 19 home runs in 20 games. You mentioned the pitching. They're giving up a little more than 1 run per game, just 22 runs in 20 games. And I'll tell you something else, Rod. They took that trip down to Louisiana. They played in Lafayette against Louisiana. Then went on down to that Mardi Gras Mambo and played a bunch of the top Louisiana teams. Don't think that Patrick Murphy didn't book that tournament with the idea, hey, we're going to open in Baton Rouge against LSU. Let's go ahead and get down to Louisiana and get a taste of it.
Yeah, it's called scheduling.
That's right.
That's a great job by Patrick Murphy.
Yeah, absolutely. This Alabama softball team, somebody called my radio show today and said, don't you think they should be number 1? I said, no, I think Oklahoma should still be number 1, but Alabama's a strong number 2, that's for sure. Still to come on TITV, Alabama women's basketball was in action up in Nashville last week for the SEC tournament and did pretty well. We'll tell you how it went when we come back. And next, your phone calls, emails, and tweets. Again, the phone number 205-348-9882. You can email us at the address on your screen, or you can tweet at us as well. Do the hashtag TITV so we'll see it. We'll be right back with the only show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide, Tighter Insider TV. Bama women's basketball at the SEC tournament in Nashville last week as an 11 seed. Now, they beat Auburn for the 3rd time this season. That was expected. But then they knocked off Georgia, the 6th seed, and had an opportunity to beat the 3 seed Tennessee. Now, had they won that game, they might be in line to go to the NCAA tournament again, but they did not. They fell up short. Christy Curry got ejected. I thought it was bogus, a couple of technical fouls. But still, Alabama will await on the NCAA selection show on Sunday. More than likely, they're going to the women's NIT, but still a couple of nice wins. They finished the season strong. It was a tough year, COVID, some injuries and so forth, but Bama basketball, good showing up in Music City. All right, welcome back into the show. Time to take some phone calls and get to some emails. Rod, let's lead it off with a phone call. Paula is with us from over in Alabaster. Speaking of Thompson High School, home of Thompson High School. Hey, Paula.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing well.
Dad.
Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to ask you, if the basketball players, how young are they? Because I think they're playing some people who are far more experienced than they are, and they're not quite used to going from high school to college. Mm-hmm. And I just wondered if that might be the case.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. I mean, last year was a veteran team. We know that. They had those seniors, Petty, Jones, Bruner, Reese, plus they had a great freshman in Primo who was a lottery pick in the draft. Yeah, J.D. Davison right out of high school, Betty Acco right out of high school, Gurley, a transfer from Furman, trying to adjust to the SEC. I think there's some validity to that, Paul. I do. I think this team has struggled to gel a little bit and find consistency, Rod, and that could be attributed some to the fact they got so many new players.
Could be, and also I think you struck on it, Gary. I think it's the leadership. You know, they lost a lot of those guys. I mean, obviously Herb Jones and Petty. I thought that those two guys were really big in terms of leadership. So, you know, sometimes it has to be developed, and you know, maybe they didn't have quite that type of leadership this year.
Yeah, Paula, thanks for that phone call. But listen, if they get hot at the right time, I'll say this. If in a couple of weeks we're talking about Alabama being in the Sweet 16, we won't worry about the loss to Georgia or the loss to Missouri or the loss to Texas A&M. They can still write the script. That's the beauty about the postseason, March Madness. A lot of what you do in March is how you remember your season, regardless of what you do in the regular season. All right, let's get to an email. And our emails are now brought to us by KDM Services, serving your family like our family, KDM Services. And our email is from Haleyville, and this is from JB. Is Kool-Aid McKinstry on the basketball team? Thank you, JB, for that email. And the answer is no. And we're going to look at some of Kool-Aid's high school basketball video from Pinson Valley where he was outstanding. Rodney, he said he wanted to play basketball, and he still may. Who knows? But I think when you're a freshman and you're starting at cornerback in the SEC to end the season, I think the priority for him and for the football coaching staff was, hey, you need to be all in the fourth quarter program. You're probably going to be a starter for us full-time next year, and we need you out here working to get better in football. Basketball can wait. You
know, that's an interesting question, an interesting subject, Gary, because I really think, you know, he's an outstanding basketball player. There's no question about that. But you're right. I think you laid it out perfectly. He's a guy that really kind of, at least initially, needs to focus on what he's doing on the football field. But Terrion Arnold was a great high school basketball player. In fact, he may be a little better, if you want to say as a prospect on this level, might have been a little bit better than even McKinstry. But those two guys were five-star DBs coming out of high school. You know, Terrion Arnold also talked about playing both sports. So, you know, maybe later, but right now, no. I think both are going to stick with football.
I think when you come in from high school, it's hard enough to play one sport, much less two. Focus on football and kind of see where basketball's at down the road. Again, our email question of the day brought to you by KDM Services, serving your family like our family. Well, still to come on TITV. Alabama Gymnastics did something this past weekend that they haven't done in 26 years. We'll tell you what that is when we come back. And more of your phone calls, emails, and tweets. Again, there's the phone number, 205-348-9882. There's the email address. You can also tweet, use the hashtag TITV. We'll be right back with more right after this. Well, prior to Friday night, Alabama Gymnastics had never scored a 198 under head coach Dana Duckworth. Now they've done it twice. Friday night, 198.075, beating Arkansas at Coleman Coliseum. Then at the Elevate the Stage meet in Huntsville on Sunday against Auburn, Arkansas, and Georgia, Alabama had an even 198 as they beat all three teams. That marks the first time since '96 that Alabama's had two 198s in the same season. And they appear to be peaking at the perfect time. This Alabama Gymnastics squad looking good here late in the season, and they'll get a break this weekend, and then it's time for the SEC Championships over in Birmingham. All right, welcome back into TITV with Rodney Orr. I'm Gary Harris. Let's get back out to the phone lines. Our good friend CB is with us here on the line from Tuscaloosa. Hey, CB.
Hey, man, how y'all doing tonight?
Doing well.
You know, Here the last few years, because I hadn't been to gymnastics for a long time. I've been taking my daughter and my granddaughter. They love it. I took, well, what was there last Friday night? I was wondering about the crowds. It looked like the crowds are different. Well, they look good Friday night, I'm telling you.
Yes, CB, I think, there was a time when Alabama and Georgia, they dominated SEC gymnastics, really. Alabama and Georgia were dominating the national scene, and crowds were incredible. Sellouts were regular. Crowds are still good. I don't think attendance this year has been, what it was at one time, but the sport's different now, too. There's so many quality programs across the country that Alabama and Georgia or UCLA or anybody really can't dominate the sport the way they once did. Maybe that's impacted them, but as you said, it's still very entertaining, and this is a really good team. Let's see what they do in the postseason. The crowds are good, probably not what they once were, but I think they could get them back there with, performances like they've had over the weekend. All right, let's get to an email, and this is going to come to us from David in Tuscaloosa. Do you know of anywhere to purchase a Bear Bryant bobblehead? David, unfortunately, I don't. And, Coach Bryant coached really before we had bobbleheads, to be honest with you. I might be wrong about that, but I don't really remember any bobbleheads maybe until the late 80s, early 90s. I don't know of any Coach Bryant bobbleheads that are out there. I'm not saying that they don't exist, but I don't know of any.
No, I don't either. Maybe someone will inform us on that. But I have one of those bottles, $3.50.
Yeah,
got one of those Coke bottles.
I got a bunch of them. But, yeah, if somebody out there knows of some Coach Bryant bobbleheads that are available, get in touch with me here at the TV station, and I'll pass it along on TI TV. Well, still to come, a former Alabama basketball player is headed to Jackson State as the next head coach of the Tigers. He's going to join Deion Sanders, who's the football coach. Wow, it's going to be a high-powered duo. We'll have that story when we come back, so you keep it dialed in right here to TI TV. We'll be coming back after this. Jeff Goodman of Stadium, the first to report that Mississippi legend and NBA champion Mo Williams has accepted a job to become the new men's basketball coach for Jackson State University. That's his hometown, Jackson, Mississippi. Attended Murrah High School, spent 2 years at Alabama, then played 13 seasons in the NBA, was an All-Star in 2009, won a championship with the Cavs in 2016. Didn't do great in 2 years at Alabama State, was 11-34 overall and 10-23 in the SWAC, but going home and he'll join Deion Sanders. That's a powerful duo there for coaches. And I want to mention to you real quickly the 2022 Clinic of Champions hosted by Alabama head coach Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide football coaching staff is set for April, and among the coaches is going to be Mike Vrabel from the Tennessee Titans and also Dave Aranda from Baylor. All right, that's going to do it for the show. A reminder that if you missed any of it, you can catch a replay tonight at 10:30 or anytime at WVUA23.com. For Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. Thanks for watching. We're going to leave you tonight with the Alabama women's tennis team. They opened the SEC season 2-0 with wins over Kentucky and Vanderbilt. And we'll see you again next week on TI TV. Have a great night, everybody.